Hello, and thank you so much for joining us to our presentation today, Digital Mental Health, Expanding Reach and Reducing Barriers for Online Learning Students. We're so happy to have you. My name is Colleen Hunter. I am the Director of Student Support Programs at Morneau Shepell, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sherry Courtemanche, who's a Client Success Manager here at Morneau Shepell. Sherry, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation.
Great, thank you. We are going to cover a quick agenda with you, but I ask you if you have any questions, either now or during the presentation, if you please just pop them into the pane or the question panel, and we'll take a look at those and answer those questions at the end of the session. We are going to give you a bit of an overview about Morneau Shepell in case you're not familiar with us. We'll cover a student mental health landscape, specifically highlighting online learning student mental health. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the programs that we offer for student support. So that includes mental health awareness training, traumatic event support, and My SSP, our student support program. We'll dive into some of the details there around student utilization, some implementation and success measures, as well as institutional configuration, and we'll wrap it up and get to your questions afterwards. So for now, like I said, I'm going to introduce you a little bit more to Morneau Shepell. So we are the world's leader in remote international counseling. We've been around as a company for over 50 years, and we've been a leader in remote mental health counseling for over 30 years. We have a lot of extensive experience given the clinical network that we have across 170 countries worldwide. We currently assist over 37 million people globally across all of our lines of business. And on the student support program side, we touch nearly 1 million students globally. What's unique about our student support programs is they were specifically designed for college and university students and institutional well-being needs. We didn't kind of slap something onto an existing product line that we already had. We created something from scratch, working with institutions and partners in the space to develop something based on the unique needs of students. So with that, what I'll do is turn it over to my colleague Sherry, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's going to get into the details of the current mental health landscape overall and highlight those online learning students' mental health needs.
Great, thanks, Colleen. And as we dive into our discussion about student mental health, I want to first ground us in what we know about the current state. I think we can all agree that it is somewhat alarming. We know that 1 in 5 students have a mental health illness when entering college. Concerns like traumatic experiences are on the rise, as reports regarding sexual assault, stalking, domestic violence, and witnessing traumatic events continues to rise. We know that 36% of students carry a lifetime mental health diagnosis, and that this has been on the rise. Looking back at numbers from 2007, we know that the lifetime prevalence of mental health diagnoses is up 22% in students. 60% of students report experiencing overwhelming anxiety. Importantly, 27% of students are impacted by depression, and approximately 30% of those students impacted by depression drop out of college. We also know from research done by Active Minds that suicide is the number 2 cause of death among college students. Since we are here at a conference dedicated to online learning, it makes sense to look at and understand if there are any unique issues to consider for online learning. There is not yet a tremendous body of work specific to online learning. However, I'm sure this will grow in the not too distant future given current events. Here are a few things that we do know. Many people drawn to online learning fall into some groups identified as vulnerable to stress and mental health issues. Some of these groups fall into categories such as first-generation college students, active military, veterans, and for older workers who have been out of school for long periods of time and returning back to grow their education. Some of the hallmark challenges that these groups face include competing family pressures between work and career, really juggling their jobs, a career, families, while obtaining education. There's also a history of socioeconomic disparities among those groups mentioned. And there's added pressure when learning new technologies, in particular for these groups as well. One other note, since many on-learning programs cater to graduate students, it's important to look at this group as well. Some of the research shows that grad students are 6 times more likely to experience anxiety and depression than other groups. We recognize that prolonged financial strain, prolonged stress of juggling personal life, career, work, family, and education can impact this particular group. All right. While there's a number of barriers to seeking mental health support up here, I want to talk just about a few and highlight a few at this time. Really, students are impacted in 2 different ways when looking at barriers for mental health. One is really the attitudinal, or what we would consider the student's inner beliefs about mental health support, services, labels, what have you. And then there's the structural, or what we would consider the environmental influences from outside of the student, essentially. So let's start with the attitudinal, or the student's beliefs. One of the common misconceptions that often creates an internal barrier for seeking mental health services among students is the belief that stress is a normal and natural part of getting an education. Huge factor. Also, a preference for self-reliance and need for autonomy, as traditional age students leave home and break out on their own and are expected by family or within themselves to really grow and be self-reliant. There is a struggle to maintain that, even when some help might be necessary. Concerns about confidentiality can be a major barrier for people in seeking mental health. People always wonder if someone will find out that they have a mental health issue or that they are seeing a counselor, and fear the judgment that others may make about them regarding this. Another major factor in driving barriers to mental health is that people are not always sure that they'll be able to find a counselor who understands them, either because of their preconceived notions about what it means to be a male or female, or other sex identified in that category, and how they would match up with a counselor. Race can be a factor. Often we know that individuals do best in counseling when they're able to match their race or language or culture, or even sexual orientation. External factors that contribute to barriers that I think are important to highlight are the fact that there is a lack of targeted training for staff and faculty who are in the most unique position to identify a student in distress. Not everyone is comfortable butting their nose into a student's problems when they recognize that someone's in distress, nor are they necessarily sure if they can handle that person's response when they do butt their nose in, and don't exactly know where to refer a student once that student opens up. Another big barrier in the environment of students is the lack of diversity among counselors. And diversity means gender, sexual orientation, cultural diversity, and the ability of diverse languages available to individuals who would like to and prefer to express themselves in counseling in their first language rather than English. So now that I've highlighted a few of the barriers out there that are top of mind for me, I also want to talk about some of the strategies that help to reduce these barriers and promote health-seeking behaviors among students. So top of my list is providing targeted training to faculty and staff so that they are comfortable intervening with distressed students and that they feel comfortable engaging with students and referring them to helpful resources. Organizations and higher educational institutions can benefit students' mental health by devoting time and energy to better promote counseling and supportive services within the institutional organization's system of care, as well as outside in the community. Offering free evidence-based mental health screening is also helpful, especially if those can be provided anonymously so that students can explore their experiences of anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, alcohol or drug use through a screening tool that can help them understand their risk based on self-report. Often people who have to answer these questions directly with another person may not be ready to confront their behaviors and habits yet, and so doing this anonymously allows students to explore those risks without fear of being judged or forced into sobriety or treatment for their mental health disorders. In addition, I would say that ensuring students have access to diverse counselors is also top of my mind. Next, Colleen is going to take us through some additional programs and services available.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That was really helpful and enlightening. I'm going to take the opportunity to share with you a little bit more about Morneau Shepell student support programs. So the first one includes mental health awareness training. So as you can see here, what we're able to provide are various trainings and workshops on topics relevant to student mental health and institutional well-being. A couple highlights worth mentioning are suicide awareness and prevention, mentoring relationships, working with challenging student behaviors, communicating across cultures, managing a multi-generational student body, and of course supporting students after a traumatic event. We're all going through the pandemic right now, which is certainly traumatic, and so a little education for faculty, staff, and leadership on how to work with students and support them in times of need is certainly something that could benefit an institution. The next program that we have is traumatic event support. So traumatic event support is really something that works in a variety of ways based on what an institution's needs are. But if you think about a traumatic event, of course the pandemic is traumatic for everyone, but really more so if there were an institutional event like a active shooter on campus or a major kind of prolific death among the community. It could be something environmental like a hurricane or a tornado that comes through the area and impacts obviously students and faculty and staff on campus, but also those who may live in the area or in the state that are impacted. So as part of our traumatic event support, what we're able to do is provide immediate consultation to institutions around how we can best support them and recommend an action plan that makes sense for your institution. We have the ability to provide service either virtually, so setting up dedicated phone lines for faculty and staff and another one for students, or on site if you've got a need where maybe you don't have enough clinicians and you'd like to quickly kind of extend availability to students, faculty, or staff with one-on-one support, with group meetings, and so on. And then of course we obviously would provide reporting on utilization, on trends of presenting issues, and can provide disaster planning for future instances as well. The next and probably most important program that we offer is called MySSP. It's our student support program that's really meant to connect students with information around positive mental health, to increase help-seeking behavior and support student success. And at the root of it, really just connect students with people that can support them anytime, anywhere, in the moment or ongoing. So what we have to offer here is 24/7 access to master's or PhD level clinicians. Students can connect with us by phone, through chat or video. They can also connect with us in a variety of languages to match their cultures, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And they can access us in the moment for real-time support in time of a crisis, or ongoing if they wanted to schedule something with a dedicated clinician. So what you'll see on the right of my slide here is just a couple of snapshots into what the app looks like. So as you can see here, easy to contact us by phone or by chat. You can see what a chat window looks like when a clinician welcomes a student into to chat support. And then you'll also see an article here. We've got a lot of kind of tidbits of information for students to consume on their own time. That's anything from short little videos to articles and more. So let's take a deeper dive into how the support works and what's available when. So 24/7 support, meaning students can access us in real time. That can be just because I'm having a bad day, or it can be, in a real crisis. Students can access us by phone, so they can save toll-free numbers to their phone and they can contact us. They can also access us by way of an app that they can download to their phone, and in the app, they can also contact us by VoIP phone service for talk or for chat. And then we have a dedicated URL as well if they just had access to, perhaps a tablet or a laptop. When students are contacting us 24/7 in the moment, they have access to counseling in 7 different languages. So that would be English, Spanish, French, Korean, Arabic, and Mandarin and Cantonese. If a student were chatting with us, it would be all of those languages except the Mandarin Cantonese becomes simplified Chinese. And one thing to note is if a student selects one of those languages as their primary or first language, all of the content that they're able to browse and all of the instruction on the app would be in that language. So if a student selects Mandarin, for example, all of the content would be in simplified Chinese for them to consume. Students can also schedule ongoing support. So this would be not necessarily needing in the moment support because I'm having a bad day or because I'm not feeling well, but perhaps there's a specific presenting issue that I'd like to work through. Maybe it's general anxiety. Maybe it's feeling pressure around academic issues in tandem with family demands. So I could work with a dedicated clinician if I were that student and schedule an appointment, let's say every Tuesday at 2 p.m., and that would be by telephone or by video. So what I'd like to do is actually pass it back over to Sherry, who again is a licensed clinical social worker, to talk a little bit more about the clinical models that we use to support students. Sherry?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. So as Colleen mentioned, there's really 2 levels of service here. One is that immediate sort of drop-in clinical emotional support that students can get by chatting in or calling. There's no appointment necessary. They just sort of reach out and are given the opportunity to speak with a counselor. The other service level we provide is that ongoing support, which works more like a traditional therapeutic framework where a student would work primarily or would work with a dedicated clinician over several sessions, which would either be in telephone or video mode. Any student who calls or chats with us is provided with an assessment so that we can have a strong understanding of the issue or concern that they're calling about, for one. Secondly, that provides us with an opportunity to really evaluate the student's concern and whether or not there's any risk factors there, such as is this person coping with a stressor in their life, or are they also dealing with symptoms of anxiety or depression, or risk from suicidal ideation or domestic violence, one of those sorts of risk factors. So everybody receives that initial intake and assessment to evaluate that problem and any elevation of risk. Once we have an opportunity to do that and the student is confident that we have a good understanding of their issue, then we provide an intervention. So we work primarily from a solution-focused brief treatment model. This practice places importance on discussing solutions rather than delving into a problem. For example, if a student were to call us with a concern about sleeplessness and feeling anxious about an upcoming exam, and that student dropped in for the immediate 24-hour support, they would have an opportunity to speak with a clinician about what's going on. They could work with that clinician in the moment to identify some quick strategies to deal with anxiety, such as learning a couple of different mindfulness techniques, such as breathing exercises to help calm the nerves, strategize about other sorts of coping mechanisms that might allow them to be able to fall asleep faster since they've been having some sleeplessness. And so if that's a very routine sort of level of stress, someone can receive that support in that 24/7 immediate drop-in model. Now, if something is more serious and that person is having extended symptoms of sleeplessness and experiencing multiple types of anxiety symptoms on a higher scale, then we'd probably want to work with that student in an ongoing way. So, for example, they might have that initial consult with their dedicated clinician, and then over a series of 3 or 4 weeks and multiple telephone sessions, that student would connect with the counselor dedicated to them and be able to work more in depth on different types of coping skills that can address sleeplessness and also address his or her ability to reduce stress in preparation for an upcoming exam or future exams. So really, in addition to that, the other intervention that we do is crisis intervention. While we gear our program towards trying to get ahead of problems with students before they snowball into bigger concerns, we know that sometimes people really don't reach out until they're at their kind of end of their rope and maybe in a personal crisis. And we're certainly here to help students who may be in that position as well. And while we still use our solution-focused brief treatment model framework, we are more actively working with that student around managing whatever risk factors they might have. And when needed, we're able to link them back with school resources, either in that moment or over a period of time, to make sure that they have all the supports and resources they need. So with my SSP, we have our intervention models and the one-on-one work that our clinicians do, but that's all embedded within what we consider a circle of care for that student. So if we just pull ourselves out of that individual interaction between the counselor and the student, it's important to understand that, as I mentioned, that's within a system or a framework of additional resources that students can lean on when they're having a difficult time. So, as I mentioned, we have the ability to refer in both directions with the campus CAPS center. So if CAPS has a student who can't seem to make it in for counseling sessions but would benefit from some solution-focused brief treatment kind of support, they can refer that person to us. Or for example, say they have a student who is having a hard time and needs some coping skills for stress, but they prefer to speak in their first language, which is Mandarin. Then the CAPS counselors can refer that student to our services for support. And likewise, if we have a student who clearly needs to be seen in person and would benefit from the expertise of a campus resource at CAPS, then we have the ability to refer students back into the CAPS Counseling Center. Now, if there isn't a CAPS Counseling Center, for example, as an online, fully online program where students may be located remotely all over the country, there's many other pieces that allow us to interact with students and provide the additional support. So clearly, we can refer students to community resources where they're at. Our counselors and support staff have the ability to search out community resources and make appropriate linkages for those students. We are always working in our circle of care to make sure that faculty and staff who touch that student, whether it's in person or through distance learning, are aware of the program and have the tools that they need to understand general mental health principles and to be able to refer those students to the MySSP program. In addition, the MySSP app provides a student with hours and hours and reams of self-directed online content to consume regarding just about any other topic. In addition, we stay very closely connected at the institution level with the MySSP account customer success management team so that we're always relaying information and staying connected about what's happening at the institution, as well as the Morneau Shepell team sharing back information with the institution about what we're seeing in terms of student trends and well-being.
Sherry, thank you so much. I just want to make one comment on the community resources. Obviously, we can refer students out to local counseling resources within their community, but it actually extends beyond that and could be very helpful to the variety of online learning students. We could refer students out to childcare options or addiction support options. So whatever a student needs, we have the ability to make those referrals. And so I'll take the control over again and talk to you a little bit about MySSP by the numbers, which is always really heartening to see. One of the things that we found is that single session interventions with students really do impact student success. So we kind of mentioned a little bit before, but when students contact us with their experience when they're connected to a clinician, we do ask them a series of questions at the beginning and at the end of every interaction that we have with students. We ask 3 questions before and after. And the questions are whether the presenting issue has the student concerned, any level of concern about their ability to kind of function, go about their day-to-day activities. We also ask if that presenting issue is impacting the student's ability to complete assignments and attend class. And finally, if that issue is impacting the student's ability to persist through to course completion or to graduation, so essentially to stay in school. What we found is that students who claim to be extremely concerned or very concerned at the beginning of the session about those 3 elements, the ability to stay in school, to complete assignments, and just general ability to function, there was a 58% improvement in their ability to stay in school following the session, so following consult with a MySSP clinician. A 61% improvement in their ability to be productive, to attend classes, to complete projects and exams, and a 65% improvement in their general level of concern about the presenting issue. So overall, what that really kind of lends itself to is that these measures contribute significantly to student success and retention, which is obviously so important and such a kind of risky element in online education. So I'll take a look together with you on the next slide for some additional statistics. So the 4th question that we ask when we connect with students at the beginning of the session, which is not asked at the end, is whether or not students have connected with other resources available to them through their institution around this mental health issue before. And what we found actually is that 84% of students who connected with a MySSP clinical counselor would not have reached out through other traditional methods. So these methods come from a myriad of different options. That could be the CAP Center, that could be a wellness center on campus, it could be an academic advisor or a career counselor, it could be a coach, a family member, a peer, and several other options. So 84% of students who are connecting with us are not connecting through other traditional means. 59% of those students reported having never used any other mental health support on campus, including the campus counseling center. So that may be in the case of online learning students because they don't have access, perhaps being in another state. But even if there are, options for them in state or even in the community, they've not reported using those. So what that really goes to show us is that we are extending the possibility of students accessing it and really extending the reach of the number of students who can access mental health support by way of MySSP. Another interesting fact is that about 75% of students who are accessing MySSP clinical support are accessing it through our chat feature. So the nice thing about chat features, it really lowers the bar. They say that when a person meets a clinician face-to-face, it takes them 3 sessions to get comfortable to share things because they're looking at that person, they're hearing their voice, they're hearing any accents, and they're wondering if that person is going to be able to support them or to be able to identify with them. But when you use chat, it really kind of brings down those barriers. You're not thinking about what the person looks like or sounds like or where they could be from. And if they're, similar or different from you. And so it's just a preferred method for students to access support and to get some resolution on some of their presenting issues. The other thing that's nice, of course, is that so many students, are accessing their courses, in mobile devices or on tablets. And so being able to have mental health support in the same tablet or device is really supportive and helpful. So let's shift over to the next slide and take a look at utilization preferences for students. So this current academic year, at the very beginning in August, we decided to ask all students about their preference for how they like to get mental health support. And what we found is that nearly 82% of students prefer real-time support. So that's, like Sherry was mentioning before, contacting us in the moment, getting support either just for, kind of a day-to-day, frustrating or presenting issue or even crisis. What we found is just over 11% of students preferring ongoing support. So contacting us with a specific goal of scheduling an appointment, a recurring appointment with a dedicated clinician to work through a specific presenting issue. And then about 7% of students like a mixed bag. So sometimes during the year, they'll contact us in the moment because they feel really frustrated with maybe something that's going on in their family, and then later on in the year they'll contact us about something a little bit more significant that they want to work with a dedicated clinician on. One of the things that has been really intriguing to us is that across our business at Morneau Shepell, we've seen a 30% utilization spike during COVID. So since around February or so, given that we do support a lot of international populations, employees and families and students abroad, and of course, we started to see COVID really spike up in other parts of the world. We have seen an increase in utilization and a bit of a shift, a little bump in ongoing, so in students and others needing ongoing support or wanting a dedicated clinician to work with. Speaking of COVID-19, we've made some changes to the services that we offer, and I wanted to share those enhancements with you here. These were community inspired based on some of the trends that we're seeing in presenting issues and hearing from students, but also from the community. So what we found, or what we learned from Active Minds, is that 80% of college students report in a survey that COVID-19 has negatively impacted their mental health. That and what we've heard directly from students prompted us to create a specific COVID-19 support section within the app so students can get materials and statistics about COVID-19, about the pandemic, just so that they know that they're not alone, they know how to protect themselves, and they know various strategies and activities that they can do to stay positive. We also added various health assessments so that students can get evidence-based information about whether or not they have an issue with depression or general anxiety, drug use, or alcohol use. So students take these assessments, which range from a handful to a few more questions, and then they'll get some additional information. They'll either be led back to some of that self-help material. They can either chat with us, or if they assess as being very serious and in urgent need, we'll encourage them to call us right away and to speak with a clinician. We did also make some other changes to the app to incorporate services not just around mental health but also around physical health and well-being, and so I'd like to share those with you now. Some of the reasons for that were certainly what we heard from students, but also, again, Active Minds surveyed college students during COVID-19 and found that 73% of students struggle to get enough physical activity while they're at home since COVID-19. So we introduced a virtual fitness element to my SSP through a partnership with Lift Session, and that offers them various exercises and videos to be able to engage in physical activity and fitness at home. Hopefully, because this is just a pilot through June, utilization is high enough that we can continue to offer this basic service included in the app past June and into the new academic year as well. Also, in the COVID-19 support section, you'll find a lot of resources about how to stay active and fit at home, various exercises, and tips and tricks on how to maintain physical well-being. So let's shift and get into the implementation and outcome measures. And for this, I'd like to pass it back to Sherry, who's going to talk with you a little bit more about those things, given that her role is to support institutions once they've come on board, and she really takes the lead here.
Thanks, Colleen. So the essential ingredients of a successful program and strong utilization include sort of the following pieces. So really, ideally, a strong working relationship between the student support program account executive and the institution or school that's purchasing the services. As my SSP is integrated most successfully with higher education organizations when we can have a full understanding of what resources exist within the institution's system, so that we can leverage those in our work with the students as we would want the institution to leverage us when we're the best appropriate resource for them. So whether that's CAPS, the faculty, or folks in the International Student Office, or TAs in the online learning programs, we want to have relationships with all the different moving parts of the institution that touch the student. Additionally, student support program communication is key. So there's a real need to build campus awareness. This means a true investment by the institution of time and resources to, one, train staff and faculty about my SSP program, but to really get the word out to students frequently and in a creative way, not just at the initial launch of the program, but really a plan that incorporates these pieces throughout the year in an ongoing way throughout the whole year. So here's a few examples of some creatively written marketing materials, but I want to mention a few other things that we do when someone like myself who's an account executive or customer support manager to an institution, we do a lot of talking about what communication channels exist for the school with their particular student groups that they're targeting my SSP for, and then we build tools for them to help them really communicate the program. So on a regular basis, we provide monthly well-being topics that are crafted into brief email communications and social media posts that the institutions can use. They're welcome to customize those and then use them in their own campaign, whether it be on their Facebook or in Twitter or Instagram, or whether they're connecting with their students via email. In addition to that, we have other sorts of resources that help support schools communicate the program. Even within the app itself, the app we're able to build out push notifications that encourage students to access materials and content on the app, as well as seek out our counselors by chatting or calling through the app at different time points. So maybe it is ramping up to midterms, and we have stacked our push notifications so that students will get a message that says, feeling stressed? Our counselors are available 24 hours a day. You can chat or call a counselor right now. Um, so MySSP is really there to support institutions in building out these creative plans, and there's no limit for those. When the ingredients are present, students are well supported, and the organization can get a line of sight into their students' well-being through our aggregate reporting. So every quarter or every end of every semester or annually, we have the ability to pull together information about how students were accessing services, and that helps tell a story about the well-being of the student population for the institution. This is all done confidentially through aggregate reporting, but we can answer questions like, what challenges are students most frequently dealing with? Could be COVID, could be other things. Who's using the program? Or even better yet, who's not? So that institutions and schools can build a communication plan around targeting those groups that didn't seem to be reached by their initial communication plan. How are students learning about the program? What promotional tools are working for students, in other words? So when students call us and access our services, we always ask them questions like, well, how did you hear about the program? It's helpful for us to understand that. And they're very willing to share whether it was a staff or faculty who recommended the program, or maybe they learned it at the student orientation in the beginning of the semester, those sorts of things. Also, we can understand when students are reaching out for help. Are the majority of students reaching out for help during the business hours, or is it really on those evenings and weekends, and what's going on with that? In addition, we can answer questions like, how many students reach out to MySP that would not otherwise reach out to CAPS or other campus resources? So as part of our full program, we, as Colleen mentioned, some of the numbers, we like to talk with students about their level of concern when they reach out to us, how it is when they first call us, what it's like after they've had an opportunity to have some emotional support, and whether or not they've accessed resources in the past or in addition to MySSP, so we can help schools understand what are the channels that students are navigating to get support, or not navigating for that matter. With that, Colleen is going to talk about some additional features for the app and how we link that with schools so that they can really put that app forward as a school resource.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And as we kind of take it home here, we'll look at how an institution can configure the app to really brand the skin of it, and make students feel like it is an institutional resource and something that really kind of supports that full circle of care. So when an institution contracts with Morneau Shepell to offer MySSP to students, we'll ask for your the color schemes and the specific color codes so that we can add those to the app. We'll ask you to support us, to supply us with your logo so that we have some continuity there. You can include your social media feed. So if you've got a Twitter account and you're promoting various things to students, that way we can incorporate that directly into the app. And finally, an institution can add additional resources. So these are resources that are specific to your school. And so if you scroll over to the next slide, we can take a look at some examples there. Basically, here you can see the University of Denver has incorporated things like counseling services for students, student outreach and support, specific things for international students and scholar services. Booth University in Canada has added an event calendar, some student employment opportunities, and academic advising links. And the University of Toronto has incorporated things like conflict resolution center or sexual violence and prevention support. So whatever additional resources you have that you want to make available to your students, we can actually incorporate them directly into the app so that students are aware of a wide range of resources available to them, including MySSP and things through the institution. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much for your time today and for your interest in learning more about student mental health and our programs. We'll take a look to see if you've left any questions throughout the presentation, but now is a good time to add additional ones if you haven't. And if you have any questions or would like to learn more, I welcome you to visit our website. I made it simple here with just bit.ly/myssp, or you can reach out to me at cohunter@morneaushepell.com. Sherry and I would like to thank you very much, and we hope to connect with you soon. Take care, everybody.